productive discussion on staying well after the age of 50. Contrary to popular belief, everything that goes wrong physically after the half-century mark is not necessarily due to old age. In this interactive presentation, Peg will share some secrets to living a long, healthy, and potentially medicine-free life. So Peg is the author of a book called Food Becomes You, Simple Steps for Lifelong Learning. And certainly no obligation, but for those who are interested, Peg did bring a few copies of her book after the event in case anyone wants to buy a book and get it signed. So all 20 of us or so, let's give a big round of applause to Peg.
Wow.
Thanks so much, Peg.
Thank you, Robert. Well, it doesn't often happen that I get applause before I even say anything, so thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I came to the library once before and really enjoyed the experience. It's a great town. I wish I lived closer, but I'm down in Norwood, so I had a fun trip through rush hour traffic to get here tonight, but it all worked. And so I've been doing this work for about 20 years, actually almost 21, and part of my work is a definite focus on nutrition, but more and more so toward lifestyle, because our lifestyle really is a predictor of what our nutrition is like, what our stress level is like, and all of the rest of it. So I enrolled in a graduate program at University of Mass in gerontology a few years ago. It was a master's program. And what I found from that program is there's a lot of research on aging, but it all relates to what goes wrong. And it really upset me because I had been doing this work long enough to see that there's a lot that can go right when we make the right changes. Or maybe some of you don't need to make any changes. I certainly did. When I was in my 40s, I was a big sweet eater, and I came to learn that that's really not a good idea. So I changed my food, I changed my lifestyle by changing careers, and I could not be happier because it gives me a chance not only to live that way, but also to support people who want to make positive changes in their life. So these two ladies I came to know on a vacation in France a couple of years ago. The woman on the left, Susan, is an actress and writer, and Sarah is from England, and she is a member of the Missing Persons Choir. She lost her son. He vanished about 25 years ago, and she lectures around the world about that experience. So these are two very vibrant ladies, and you can trust that there was plenty of conversation as we're on that vacation that week. So much to talk about, and that's who I like to be around, are vibrant, interesting people who have a lot to say and a lot to hear, because I think that's a really important part of quality of life. So I'm going to go to this little quote because I think what I'd like you to take away tonight is the belief that lifelong wellness is available and possible for all of us. So this says, behind me is infinite power, before me is endless possibility, around me is boundless opportunity. Why should I fear? So it struck me, this quote, because there's a lot of fear that comes up if we're in the wrong kind of community. There's fear of getting sick, there's fear of running out of money, there's a lot. Have you had that experience of hearing people say that There's nothing good that's going to come from aging. Sometimes we even hear it from medical people. Get ready, you're likely going to be sick. And so to overcome that, I think we have to surround ourselves with people who have a set of beliefs that are about possibility, about potential for us to get well if we're not already well, and stay well if we are. So that's really what I like to focus on and help people figure it out. So to me, there are 5 simple steps for achieving lifelong wellness. They include food, managing stress, movement, getting rest, and building social connections. They're all, in my mind anyway, equally important. So would anybody like to take a guess at what the major cause of death is in our country? Yes?
Social isolation.
Social isolation. That is an awesome answer. Thank you. Anything else?
I'd say stress.
What is it?
Stress.
Stress. You are so smart because very often what I hear is heart disease, cancer, those kinds of things, kidney failure, diabetes, Alzheimer's. Those are not the causes of death in our country. Those are the results of social isolation, of stress, unmanaged stress. So what we have to do is back up a little bit and look at what we can do to remain well or to get well. So I'm going to start with food. So we have 2 foods here. Every food that we eat is unique or that we buy. On the left, you see a highly processed food. On the right is a simple whole food. So very, very different. Most things that come in packages are processed and have chemicals in them, almost always a lot of sugar and low-grade oils. So as you can see, the characteristics of those Peggy Lawton cookies are, they will give you a fluctuating energy level, because when you get an infusion of sugar, you get a little lift, don't you? But then you come crashing down. You're getting chemicals and additives. It's a highly refined food. It has virtually no nutrients in it, and it will trigger hunger when you have that crash. An apple, on the other hand, you may have had your mom say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, an apple will give you steady energy. It's fiber rich, which is something we all need all our lives, but very often as people grow older, they're less mobile, and if their diet isn't good, they're going to have problems with constipation. So we need foods that are fiber rich to keep the system going. An apple has more than 1,000 phytonutrients in it, and it takes time to eat. It's crunchy, isn't it? So you can't inhale an apple the way you might inhale a cookie. So it has all sorts of really wonderful qualities. I will say apples are a food that you should buy organic. Apples have a way of absorbing chemicals from pesticides if you buy conventional, so I always recommend that you buy organic when you're buying apples. I mentioned earlier that I was a big sweet eater. In my former career, I was actually called by some of my colleagues Peggy Lawton, because I always kept those cookies in my desk drawer for my 4 o'clock pick-me-up. I didn't know then how damaging sugar was, so I ate a lot of it when I was younger. Then I started having gum problems and high triglycerides. And I said, well, something's wrong here. And I did some research and figured out it was the sugar. I changed the way I ate. I started eating a lot more fruit. I ate a lot of nuts. I don't eat much meat, but I eat fish and some poultry, but mostly seafood, vegetables, beans, grains, just very simple foods. And I mix them up in all different ways so I don't get tired of it. So those are the basic differences between a low nutrient food and a high nutrient food. So any questions about that or comments? Okay. I will have time for questions as a group at the end of the talk, but also if anyone wants to talk personally offline with me, I'll be available for that too. So how do you get simple whole foods? You can get them at the grocery store for sure, but it's a little tricky there because if you go in shopping when you're hungry, it can be trouble. So go when you're not hungry, go right to the fruits and vegetables, go to the grains. What grocery stores do you have up here? Which is it? Oh, Hannaford's? Okay. So they have the bins with grains and nuts, I believe.
In bulk.
Mm-hmm. The bulk, yes. Good. Any Whole Foods up here? Okay. I'm a little disappointed with Whole Foods since Amazon took them over. It's definitely shifted. But you can find good quality food in all of the stores. You just have to know what you're looking for. My website, Wellness and You, has a lot of information about how to go shopping on the blog, what foods to choose, and many, many recipes. My whole philosophy is eat simple whole foods and make it easy to prepare. So I'm all about 20 minutes or less for prep time because that's really all you need when you're working with fresh, nutritious foods. So the other things are, how many of you have gardens, vegetable gardens? Great. Okay, in your yard? Uh-huh. Okay, excellent. Farmers markets? Yes, you use them, great. How about CSAs? Is there one here? Excellent. So those are other sources of good quality food. So we have a lot of choices today. There are some parts of the country where they're called food deserts. You have to travel 50 miles to get to a grocery store that has high quality food. We don't have that disadvantage, but what we do have is access to all sorts of foods, from the very best to really fast food junk. So we have a choice, and the more we practice healthy eating, the healthier we'll be. Our bodies become whatever it is that we eat. So our cells are constantly changing, replacing themselves. So the more you eat healthy foods, the healthier you'll be. And the less apt you will be to have any weight issues. So that's the food. Now, anybody here stressed? This poor lady, she's having a really difficult time. Anybody struggling with stress or? Exactly, yes. We can get it from our personal lives. We can get it from listening to the news. We can get it from worry about climate change. I mean, there's a million things that can stress us. I do some workshops on stress management, and the point I like to make is if we were doing a workshop on that topic today, I would ask for a show of hands on who gets stressed out by having a check bounce? Who gets stressed out by getting stuck in traffic? Who gets stressed out by your kids, getting your kids to do what you want them to do? Who gets stressed out by your work? Different people raise their hand for different things. So my point is, it's not actually the stressor, it's our response to it. Because you could say, oh, bounce check, so I'll just take care of it, where somebody else would be like, oh, my credit rating, this is the end of the world. And to them it is, until they learn that, wait a minute, it's time to stop and breathe, it's time to ground myself, it's time to problem solve. So we're all different in that way. My son was telling me a story. He lives in Medfield and works in Cambridge. So he has a nightmare of a commute. He's working from home one day a week now, but he said he used to get all worked up in traffic, and he'd be zigzagging between lanes trying to make a little headway, and he'd be getting all angry. And he said he finally realized, he and his wife have 2 little kids, finally realized, wait a minute, this is the only time of day that I'm by myself. What am I doing this for? Getting myself all worked up. And so now he puts on podcasts, he puts on music that he likes, and he doesn't care when he gets to work. So he's lucky that he's in that position, that he's not operating on a time clock. Some people are, and that's a whole other issue. But he found a way to make the most of it, and now he's a happier guy getting into the office and getting into the house at the end of the day. So we all need to stop and think, wait a minute, what am I getting all worked up for? So there's that part of stress, but the other part is, when we don't manage it, what happens to our bodies? What happens to our minds? Nothing good. We're releasing cortisol and adrenaline and all the hormones that make your blood pressure go up, give you headaches, cause sleep disturbances, all sorts of things. So we want to just stomp down on the stress and relax. It's a very important part of healthy aging. We may have issues around all sorts of things as we grow older. Some people find themselves alone after many, many years. I'll share with you, I'm getting married next week after many, many years of being by myself. So let me tell you, it's stressful. It's a wonderful kind of stress, but it's stressful. So I'm working hard on keeping a lid on that and doing things to help me look at the joy of it and the pleasure and excitement of starting this new life. But it's on the top 10 of stressors in life, as is the death of a loved one, moving, there are lots of them, job change. So you have to find ways to cope with whatever is going on, really, in order to stay healthy, stay well. So that's the stress story. Now the next one is move. I'm not suggesting to any of you that you do what this person is doing. However, if you can, go for it. It's a great way to keep your spine flexible, really works well on balance. But movement, research is finding, is one of the most important things for preventing dementia. It used to be some years ago that if you did Sudoku every day, or a crossword puzzle, memory games, that was the answer. But now it's looking more like movement is really important. Anyone know why? Anybody have a sense of why that is?
Maybe blood flow, I would say, to the brain.
Yes, better circulation to the brain. And it also releases endorphins when you're moving, not just while you're moving, but afterward. And those are the happy hormones that really will generate well-being in your body. And back to the stress point, I don't know about you, but anytime I let stress take hold of me, I can't think very clearly. Have you had that experience? Yeah. There's just something that will make it really difficult to process when you're very stressed. So movement ties into that, because I know for myself, one of the most relaxing things I can do is go for a walk first thing in the morning. Whatever I wake up worrying about quiets down, and I get some clarity from walking. So movement is very, very important. And then the next thing, rest. When we are asleep, that is the time our bodies do all their regeneration and repair work. It's a very important part of living, is to sleep. So anybody have trouble with sleep? Yeah, it's a very common problem. So what do you do? What techniques have you used to sleep more?
Meditation.
What is it?
Meditation.
Meditation, yes. Yeah.
Good psychology.
Yeah, it's a lot about figuring out what works for you. Some people need to get out of bed, walk around a little bit, and then go back to bed. Others do better staying in bed, meditating, reading a little bit. So experiment if you're having trouble with sleeping. One thing that's really important with regard to sleeping is we sleep our best when the hormones, the sleep hormones, including melatonin, are releasing in our body. There are appetite hormones that interfere with the release of melatonin. So if you are eating and then go to bed, those sleep hormones aren't going to activate right away. So a good rule of thumb is to eat nothing for the last 3 hours that you're up. If you can do that, you're going to set the stage for much better sleep. And then, as I mentioned, the repair part, your body can't do the repair work while you're sleeping if you're busy digesting. So you want your digestion to be done with before you go to sleep. So while you're sleeping, you can do your repair work. Then you wake up refreshed in the morning, and you've done a good job for your body. There was a study done out at UCLA on rats, which are a little bit different from humans, but it gave 2 groups of rats the exact same amount of food. One group could eat the food on demand whenever they wanted. The other group could only eat it within a 10-hour threshold. So they went 14 hours every day without any food. And what happened was the rats that only ate in that 10-hour framework had very noticeable fewer markers of aging than the rats that could eat anytime they wanted. And they also had better movement, flexibility, less weight gain. So there's a lot of promise in looking at that. Some people will call it intermittent fasting, kind of a hip name right now, but really intermittent fasting can come in many forms. It can be what I just described, or it can be 1 whole day a week of not eating anything, which I don't think is a great idea. But that practice of having a good 10 to 12 to even 14 hours of no food gives your digestive system a break, and it gives your repair mechanism plenty of time to restore and revitalize you, and it improves your sleep. So give it a try. And then the next thing, which you said, connect socially. I read a story recently about a survey that was done in England, where they found 100,000 elderly people reported that they had not a single meaningful conversation with anybody in the previous 30 days. I mean, to me, that's devastating that people could go that long without a meaningful conversation. So the research is showing that that has a very detrimental effect on our well-being, that loneliness thing. Some people would call themselves introverts, but even introverts need some interaction. We know, if we go way back to the beginning of life, that babies will literally die if they're not touched. So contact, physical contact as well as just social contact is very, very important for our health and well-being. If you don't have a lot of access to other people, having a dog or a cat can also be a form of connection. So we all need, you know, Barbara Streisand said it, people need people, and it's really true. It's just part of the well-being with that is that you choose people that lift you up, not people who drag you down. 'Cause that's really not much fun. Okay, so I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my book, Food Becomes You. I wrote the book for two reasons. I had been writing articles for quite a long time for various blogs and newspapers, and several of my clients said, "You really should do a book." And I said, "Yeah, sure, sometime." And then when I took that graduate program in gerontology that I mentioned earlier and found that all the research was telling people, expect to be sick, plan on it, you know, what is it, Merck's Manual on Aging. Oh, I read that and gosh, just get ready for your skin to sag, your kidneys to fail, your feet to fall off. I mean, it just went on and on about everything that should go wrong. And I thought, wait a minute, if that's the best information we have out there and people start developing symptoms, they're going to think it's unavoidable and that it's just inevitable, where when you take these 5 steps that we just talked about, you can get better. I've seen it happen over and over. So there are stories about people I've worked with through the years who have gotten better. A man who came to me when I did a health history with him said that both his parents had type 2 diabetes. And he said, so I guess I'll get that too. And when we talked about his parents' lifestyle, it became very clear that it was lifestyle that caused that. It was their diet, lack of movement. It wasn't inevitable. And type 2 diabetes actually can be reversed if you put the work into it for many people, not everybody, but for many people. So sometimes when we get a diagnosis of something, we think, well, that's it, I have to live with it. And I don't think that's necessarily true, because I've seen the changes that occur when you change your food, when you change your lifestyle. I had an experience last fall where I started seeing a little bit of a rainbow around lights. at night. And I thought, that's something that's not normal. So I saw my ophthalmologist, but before I went, I did some research on it about nutrition. So I went in and he said, you have the start of a cataract and in my left eye, and he said, you can possibly see a fast acceleration and you'll need surgery by February. Or it may be more gradual, might be a year, but we do 70 or more cataract surgeries a week here at our clinic. So I brought up the topic of nutrition and supplements, and he said, let me tell you, that's a lot of hogwash. If you have a cataract, it will only get worse. So I looked at him and I said, game on. So I've been drinking my carrot juice, I've been meditating, I've been giving myself Reiki, energy medicine, and I've been taking one supplement, and it not only hasn't gotten worse, but it's gotten a little better. So I can't wait to go back and have him take a look. But you know, that's a small thing in terms of what can happen. There's a book you might be interested in if you have anyone in your life who's been touched by cancer. It's called Radical Remission. And it was written by a woman, Kelly Turner, who found, she was doing research in microbiology, and she found several people who were stage 4 end-of-life cancer patients who had complete remission. So she got really fascinated with that and ended up doing her doctorate on that topic. And that's what her book is about. So it's a really powerful story about the potentiality of everybody healing, even in the most serious of circumstances. I think Alex Trebek might be an example too. And so glad he's such a public figure. I heard him say that the medicine has done wonders, but he thinks the love has done even more. And that's pretty cool. And so I hope, if nothing else, what we've talked about tonight gives you hope and a sense of empowerment about your ability to stay well or get well if you don't feel so great right now, because we all have that ability. Maybe I'll come back next year and tell you about my non-cataract. Yes.
I heard you just mention supplements. What do you see the role of vitamins, supplements, etc., above and beyond food?
About the role of vitamin supplements?
Above and beyond the food that you eat.
Okay, so I always start with food, but there are some situations where food isn't enough, and then you have to look at supplements. So an example for me, I take liquid fish oil because I don't eat fish often enough, and I think it's just a very important nutrient for our brain, our joints, and our mood, and our heart. So when you're eating well and you still feel some deficits, I think finding a very good supplement is really important. And I'm not talking about the CVS off-the-counter ones. I'm talking about real quality supplements. They're a little more expensive, but they have longer shelf life. They have companies that do extensive research and development. Nordic Naturals is one company. Metagenics is another that I like. I mentioned the man with parents with type 2 diabetes. My parents each had dementia. My dad had Alzheimer's and my mom had vascular dementia. So I feel like it's especially important that I do everything I can to prevent the same fate for me. My dad had malnutrition as a child, had a rheumatic heart, and smoked for 60 years, so that probably didn't help him. But still, I feel like I need to pay attention to that and do the best I can to really take care of myself in a very holistic way. I have a couple of more slides, and then I'll open it to more questions. But these are the takeaways I hope that you'll give some thought to. One is that we all have unlimited potential for lifelong wellness. There's a doctor, I can't think of his name in the moment, but he wrote a book called Live Long and Die Short. And I just love that idea. And if you talk to people who are in their 90s, you'll find that most of them have not been very sick, have not been around hospitals, are pretty slender, are pretty active, walking, and have good connections. They have all these qualities that we talked about. Can you think of somebody in your life like that? If you don't have somebody, there's, I have a thing in, on my Google search. It comes in automatically every night. My keyword is centenarians. So it's stories about people who are over 100. And their stories are fascinating. They're from all over the world, and they have so much to teach us about what life can be like if we live to 100. These are not unhappy people. These are people who are enjoying life. One little aside about that, there was a lady in Italy who lived to be 116 or 17. And when she was 104, some researchers from Harvard School of Public Health went over to interview her. And they were young researchers. And they asked her a lot of questions about how many people she saw in a given day, how her activities of daily living, bathing, dressing, eating, preparing food, and all of that were going for her, and what her diet was like. And at the end of the interview, they told her, one of them told her that she really should cut back on her eggs because they could raise her cholesterol. This was a lady that was 104, and she lived to be 116 or 17, and on her very last day of life, she ate a raw egg. So these people who are over 100 have so much to teach us about common sense and quality of life. So I would really encourage you to find that link so that you can get these stories too. So remembering too that food becomes us. What we put in our bodies becomes us. I think the most graphic illustration of that was the video some years ago of the man who ate nothing but McDonald's for 30 days. Do you remember that? How sick he got so quickly. So the opposite is true too. When I changed my eating, 6 months after I had very high triglycerides, they had dropped 200 points. So I was astonished that we could get better that quickly, but it really does happen when you change your food. Remembering that stressful events are inevitable. We'll have them in our lives. We have to learn how to deal with them. And it may be reaching out to other people, it may be meditating, it may be just isolating a little bit, whatever it is you need. Journaling is another technique, prayer is an important technique. Whatever works for you, practice it. And then think about what your thinking is about your future. My aunt passed away 3 years ago, and she was 98, and she was almost totally blind from macular degeneration. She was pretty hard of hearing, and her body was very frail, but her mind was really sharp. And she was in a nursing home for the last couple of years, and she said to me one day, actually two little gems. She said, always make friends, because life changes. People move away, people die, your interests change as you evolve. So always make new friends, young, old, and just like you, but keep broadening that circle. The other thing she said was, I refuse to eat at a table in the dining room here where people are complaining about their ailments. She said, I have plenty of them, and the last thing I want to do is hear about anybody else's or to talk about my own. So she knew how to take care of herself in difficult circumstances. So our adaptability is also a very important factor in our quality of life. And then the last thing is, whatever's come up for you tonight that you're thinking, oh, I really haven't done much walking, or I get too stressed out, or I'm too isolated, or my diet is terrible, whatever it is, or I have terrible sleep, just go back and think, what can I do this week, maybe tomorrow, to make a little change? Because it's not global changes that work for most of us. It's little steps, one day at a time, making little changes, and then you see what happens.